This podcast is brought to you by iDemon Studios, where art is made, and Real Deal Books, and McClung Originals. Art that matters. This is episode 31G for March 18th, 2021. I want to play a segment. I'm going to play a segment of the Daily Show Ears Only edition, or Ears edition, with Trevor Noah, and he's interviewing a lady who is let's use the phrase black or Afro-American, and she's talking about adopting children that may be black by white folk and so on. And here's what she has to say about raising black folk. That's not right. Raising a black child in a white family.
Adopt black children.
So let me preface my answer by saying I was very loved. And I believe that transracial adoption can work. What I also think is that it presents a dynamic that mirrors the kind of foundational relationship between black folks and white folks. I am not likening transracial adoption to slavery. I'm saying that the foundational dynamic between black folks and white folks in this country and other countries, but in this country, is white people setting the tone, setting the structure, setting the standards, deciding what is valuable, making choices for those who don't have any rights, really. And so that's what black kids are in these families. And so if white parents adopt black children and they don't make very conscious decisions about incorporating, including, immersing, valuing blackness,
Right.
then it's deeply problematic, right? And they don't make very conscious decisions about incorporating, including, immersing, valuing blackness,
Right.
then it's deeply problematic, right? It's not just one doll, it's not just one poster, it's not just one mentor. It's really an immersion process that has to happen, and that doesn't happen. And so should white parents adopt black children if they are prepared to raise black children into black adults?
Johnson, it doesn't have to be about black or white, Rebecca. Why can't they just be raised as a family member? Why do I have to remind them of their blackness? Why do I have to exclude them from the family? What do you think they're missing when they say these things?
The idea of just being a Johnson is in keeping with this notion of racelessness or colorblind or post-racial, which is basically the message is, I will value you only if I strip you of something that is so critically important to you, right? Like, I want you to see that I am black. That's important to me. I don't need you to bring it up in every conversation, but that's the thing, right? Is that so many white people think, well, if I'm recognizing your blackness, it's that I'm othering you. No, if you're recognizing my blackness, you're recognizing what a phenomenal legacy and culture and people that I come from.
That was Rebecca Carroll with Trevor Noah on the Daily Show podcast on Spotify, and I hope I haven't violated any copyrights or infringed upon any copyrights by including that short snip from his show. But I've given him credit, and the book is, hold on a second, Surviving the White Gaze by Rebecca Carroll. I'm sure the book is available, probably on Amazon. So get the book, read the whole thing, get some insight into that situation and her her situation, her life, dealing with raising an Afro-American child. I have a problem with calling people black because they're not black. I mean, and I'm not that keen on African American any more than I am, calling some. I mean, come on. I mean, if you live in a country like America and you're American, and your heritage and your culture that you came from or your ancestors came from is really not an issue. So anyway, what I'm trying to suggest here, what I'm getting at is what she said there was the blackness or the culture of black folk. And she used the word folk, by the way. It wasn't me. I'm just repeating the word that she used, and which is not a bad word, but I'm just saying folk. Um, it seems to me, it is my opinion, shall we say, that I don't think that's the way it should be done. And I might get in some hot water with some people, probably with people on both sides of the issue, if there is even an issue. I mean, there is an issue, because, mostly because white people make it an issue. And they're not really white, are they? I don't know. I've seen some white people. Almost albino. Anyway, it seems to me, it's like she said, if you're a white couple or a white parent and you're raising a black child. Now let's suppose this black child, I'll use black, all right, because we all know what it means, and that's cool, okay? But suppose that you're a white girl and you have sex with a black guy and you have a baby and the child comes out kind of black or brown. Let's say light black. Don't think I could say dark white, but anyway, well, maybe I could. Anyway, I have experience with that situation in my own life. And not that I've produced any black or light black children, but there are, in my lifetime, I have experienced I've had the experience of parenting a, shall we say, black child, or in this case, a mixed race child. And as far as I know, at this point, she's doing all right. She's doing good, as far as I can tell. And so I guess I did a pretty good job at the time. I didn't have the opportunity, didn't last a long time. I wasn't like, her whole childhood and her whole teenage years and so on. My direct relationship with her ended when she was about 5 years old, I think. Direct as a parent situation. And I'm not going to get into the details, but for several years, for 5 years, first 5 years of her life, I was her daddy, father figure. And that was an interesting time, an interesting situation. But I really enjoyed being her father and trying to contribute to her growth as a human being. But I did not see any opportunity for me to succumb to this concept that, there's some kind of culture involved. I mean, she was born in America. She lived in America. Her parents were American, regardless of their race or the color of their skin. And I was not biological father. I was not directly related to the father or mother, but I did, and I wasn't particularly an adoptive or foster parent. I was, well, my girlfriend was the grandmother, and she got custody of the child to take care of it in the beginning. Won't get into those details either. It's not particularly a good story, but it was something I did out of the goodness of my heart, and I believed in it, and I did it. Did what I could. Not enough, apparently, but I did. Anyway, she turns out all right, as far as I can tell. At any rate, the thing is, I didn't think of her as being an example of black culture. And there were even some in her family, the little girl's family, like her grandfather and so forth, that were racist and were very unhappy about this innocent child being in their lives. And there was some unpleasantness involved. But I think eventually he came around and started acting like a decent human being. And hopefully that's something that is an improvement on his life, his granddaughter's life, and so on. So anyway, I didn't even think about black culture. I'm a white person. I live in a white environment. And this child, this innocent child, came into my life, and I considered it a blessing. And I did the best I could to parent that child at that time for as long as I did, because things changed and circumstances changed, and that was no longer a feasible thing for me to do. However, she did have supervision, and she grew up and was educated and so forth, and she's doing her thing. And I'm proud of her, actually, and a wonderful person, I think. I didn't raise her during that, say, 5 years period. I didn't treat her any different than I would have my own child, or as if she was white or yellow or whatever. I mean, she was just a little girl. And she had some things to overcome because she was a premature birth at 6 months of gestation, and she survived. And she is, as far as I know, quite healthy and is doing very well physically. And I'm, it was a good thing. It worked out great for her. And I think I'm very happy to have been a part of that life. But I did not raise her with any kind of, she's a black girl, I gotta treat her like she's got a black culture in her thing. And I mean, there wasn't any denial. I mean, obviously she was not white. And I was not ashamed to be seen with her. I took her with me when I went out, shopping or visiting family, both all her family or my family and so on. And there was no question. There was no discussion about this. It wasn't like I took her with me when I went to Christmas dinner at my mother's house, and my aunts and uncles were there. And I mean, there wasn't any, and my brother and his wife, so on. There wasn't any discussion about what color this little girl was. She was what she was, a little girl. She acted like a little girl. She was well behaved and polite, as they were around her. Nobody brought up the fact that she was not white. And of course, my family knew the story, the backstory, and knew where it was coming from and why I was taking care of her, along with her grandmother, that was my girlfriend at the time. And it just wasn't even a question. You understand what I'm saying? It just, I don't see why it has to be anything else but that. Here's a little person, a child, a human being, a little girl. She grew up. I treated her as if she was just a little girl and happened to be in my charge at that point. Color of her skin is irrelevant. So this woman is suggesting that I shouldn't, deny her blackness, as it were, and I didn't, because obviously she was not white. I mean, you could look at her hair and see that her hair was, African American hair, and that was fine. I mean, that's what she was. That's the way it is. I didn't see any reason to make an issue of that. Now, her grandmother, who was taking care of her along with me at the time, tried to do her best to treat her and deal with her situation like her hair. I mean, black hair has to be taken care of, as white people has to be have it takes certain kinds of techniques in order to comb it and brush it, whatever that is necessary to clean and groom the hair of a small female black person, because their hair is special. It's different than white people's hair. So it takes different techniques on grooming, special kinds of brushes and so on. That's part of the culture, or is that just simply part of the nature of different kinds of people, or different races, if you will? I don't see any reason why that is an issue. It is simply, if you're not prepared to groom a little girl's African American hair, that just sounds silly. Her, I want to say Negro. All right. So she had the Negro race kind of hair. And we tried to, I wasn't in charge of grooming her hair, but tried the best she could. The grandmother tried the best she could to groom her hair and comb it and brush it and so forth, and style it in the best way that she could. It was just part of the deal. If you have somebody who has some other thing, some other feature of them, like, I can't think of anything at this point other than hair, but I don't see why it has to be an issue of race. Why not just an issue of, this is the kind of hair she had, deal with it accordingly? Like the woman said, now, from what I just went back and listened to this again, and apparently she is a black woman raised by a white family. And she admits she was loved and so on. That was all very good. But she mentions this paradigm is if you're being raised by white parents and you're a black girl or a black child, and something about stripping that person of their blackness. It's like, I don't get that. And why would anybody do that? Why would anybody even think like that? It just seems to me like, you're people and you have people. And people have children that are people, and then you raise them as people. What's wrong with that? Why does it have to be about that? This doesn't help us get past this racial divide. We need to join together as people. As is often said, there's only one, well, that's wrong. There's only one species, and that's the human species. There obviously are different races. I got to go back and say this. There's only one race, that's the human race, and that's wrong because race is not the same as species. And that's another one of those words where people like try to, bastardize the language and call it, oh, that word means something else. It doesn't. It means what it means. So anyway, what I'm getting at is why? Now, I can imagine that if a person is a black person and they're a child and they're growing up in a society like America, for example, which is, just reeks of racism. Sorry if you don't agree, but yeah, it does. And by the way, racism is sucky. If you're a racist, fuck you. But at any rate, moving on. Seriously, it's just disgusting. Stupid is not. There's no rational reason for that kind of attitude towards human beings. It's just sickening. At any rate, why do we have to separate people based on this? All right? I mean, for example, there's a white woman and a guy, and the guy happens to be a very suntanned man. Let's say Italian. Of Italian descent, and he's been in America his whole life. He was born here. His parents were, say, immigrants and full-blooded, genuine Italians, whatever. And so this person has a very dark complexion. And he marries a very white girl. Actually, she's not a white girl. She's a girl with white skin pigment. I don't like the idea of associating the pigment color of a person to a specific type of person, like a black person or a brown person or a red or yellow or whatever. I just don't think that's necessary. And I don't think I think you could raise people together, just here's a child, it is what it is, and it's a very beautiful color of whatever it is, and that just happens to be its skin tone. I realize there are cultures. I realize that there are groups of people on the planet that because of their environment, they are involved in a culture. The Chinese culture, for example. How about the Native American culture? Yeah, that's true. That exists. And there seems to be some kind of concept going around, particularly today, with all this awareness and stuff, is that, remember your culture or your heritage. And, you can remember your heritage. I mean, come on. Let's be honest. If you're a black person born in America, has never been to Africa, and you've lived your whole life since day one in America, you're not an African. You're an American. And the culture you live in is the American culture. Now, good or bad, right or wrong, there's racism in the country. That's wrong. But I mean, good or bad, right or wrong, that you're, how do I say it? Whether American culture is good or bad, right or wrong, which is a lot of times it's wrong because it's racist involved there. If you're not a racist, then, the question doesn't even exist. But you're an American. And whatever the culture, meaning, basically whatever neighborhood you live in. whatever environment you live in your home, is your culture. And we like to associate other things to cultures, like, you know, East Indians are like, the culture, Hindu, and so on. We have the Arab culture with Islam, a disgusting religion, such as, yeah, so is Christianity, but we're not talking about that. The culture thing is just not necessary. But you don't want to forget your heritage. Like, okay, my ancestors back there, I don't know, 4 or 5 or so generations were people that came over here from Scotland and Wales and perhaps Ireland. My ancestors were Welsh and Irish. I mean, Welsh and Scottish. My ancestors. I'm not Scottish. I'm not Welsh. I've never been to Wales. I have no idea what goes on in Wales. Except I've got a friend that lives over there who tells me a bit about it, but there's no connection to me and my life. Oh, you forgot your heritage. No, my heritage is in America, where I've always been and where my parents were always here. Except for my dad, who was in the Great War, the Second World War, and he was in the Philippines and so forth for a while. But otherwise, we're Americans. My parents were Americans. My grandparents were all of them, 4 of them. They were Americans, born and raised here in America. And if you take another person, and I know someone that's my age who has children and grandchildren, and they were born in America, and his parents were born in America, and his grandparents were born in America, and his great-grandparents were born in America. He's not a freaking African. He's American. So why not raise everybody in America as Americans? Why does race even have to be an issue? Why does heritage have to be an issue? Oh, you got to remember your heritage. Why? Seriously, why? What difference does it make to you that you live in America? You've always been in America. Your family's been born in America. Some ancestor back there sometime happened to be born and raised and lived in freaking Ireland or Italy or China or wherever. I'm sorry. It doesn't connect to you. It's not your hair. I mean, it's in your background history-wise as far as your ancestors are concerned, but it has no relevance to you. I mean, if you're like your ancestors back 5 or 6 or 10 generations came from, let's say, where? Spain or Africa, let's say, where? Nigeria or whatever, or East India, China, Japan. Okay? So what? What's that got to do with you? Well, you should know the history of your... Yeah, well, I think you should know the history of humanity, including every aspect and every different culture and every different race and every different country around the world, back as far as you can find that information. But it has no relevance to you today. It's just a nice thing to know about. Big deal. Seriously. No relevance to you. It's not important. Seriously, it's not. So raise this little girl who happens to be a dark-skinned person. Raise her like she's an American. And she has some particular characteristics physically, like her hair is like, what do they call it? Kinky. You know what a black hair looks like. Black person's hair. It's difficult. You can't just comb it and brush it and stuff like a white girl's long, straight, blonde hair. It just doesn't work that way. Now, we can suggest that, yeah, she's got African American hair. Yeah. Well, she's just got straight African hair. So, it's hair. And it's that kind of hair. It has that texture. It has that color. It has that body. It has that nature. So, it requires a different kind of treatment than a blonde kid with long blonde hair. Straight, long blonde hair. And, as I understand it, you can actually, straighten out hair. I've known that girl I was telling you about that I had something to do with for a few years when she was first young and born. She now has straightened hair. And she's learned how to take care of her own hair and treat it as her own and do with it as she pleases. And if she wants to have an afro, and she does. And if she doesn't want an afro, then she does some other way. As a person with that kind of hair. Just like, okay, I've got blue eyes. And that's because of what? Because my ancestors had blue eyes? Or because, guess what? I have blue eyes. And if I don't like blue eyes, then I am stuck with them. I guess I could wear contacts that have different colors and make them a different color that way, but, who cares? It's just a characteristic of me. I have blue eyes. I have brown hair that's turned into sort of a light, it's salt and pepper. More like salt and paprika, maybe. But it is what it is, and I will comb it accordingly. It's getting a little thin. I will deal with that accordingly. But I hardly think that. I know, of course, then you have the gingers, the red-haired people. The Irish red-haired people. Like, okay, so? And I don't see any reason why anybody should have a problem with red hair. I had a red-haired girlfriend. I thought she was lovely and adorable. Not just physically and not just because she had red hair, but because she was a nice person. And I know they have a reputation, but big deal. She wasn't like that. The point is, you're American. You've always been American. Your parents are American. You live in America. You're American. Live American. Be American. Grow up American. Do what Americans do. Pay attention to now. Pay attention to your life as it is and as it was as you grew up. Remember your childhood. Be interested in the history of humanity as you are attached to it as a person. I could say that my ancestors at one time, way back there, actually were Chinese. Or Nigerians or something, I don't know. Wherever the Welsh and the Irish came from. Russian, I don't know. I don't know, don't care. I mean, I could care enough to check it out and do some research, but does that change the way I live my life now? Nope. Am I going to get all crazy and say, well, my ancestors came from Wales and Scotland, and I got to go back there and live because that's where I belong? My ancestors shouldn't have left there. They should have stayed there and lived in their own country because that's where they belong. Because they were born there and they belong there. So much for exploring other countries and other continents and other situations in the world and seeing other parts of the planet. So you follow what I'm saying? Let's not get crazy about this. Let's just deal with it as it is. And I like the idea of everybody being an individual. I'm a big person. I'm big on individualism and individuality and personal responsibility for those individuals who, for yourself, for your behavior, for your growth, for your intelligence, for your growing and your evolution as a human being. I don't go around saying, oh, an Afro-American, I have to treat them differently than I do my white guy friends. I don't have any white guy friends. I don't have any friends. Why? Because you're an asshole? No, but because I choose not to be burdened with such entanglements as the United States should have remembered when the guy said, avoid foreign entanglements. All right, that's political. We won't get into that. Anyway, the point is, as I've said, just be a person, live your life, grow, improve, evolve, learn, and let's stop with all this petty little details about race and culture. And then black people, they're black. That's what they are. They're brown, actually, but, whatever. I've seen maybe 7 black people in my life, in real life. When I was in college, there were some black folks there from another country. They were from Nigeria or somewhere over there in Africa. Students learning. And they were there to learn, and they did, I guess. They were students, and there was another congregation of a couple more that were here as a delegation from another place for whatever reason. They were here visiting, and I just happened to meet them. And they were nice folks, friendly, and we talked, and it was cool. But they were really black. I mean black, like coal. And I was just amused in the color of their skin. But I didn't think, I'm looking at this guy who was like really black, and I'm thinking that guy must have come from, a place that comes where there's lots of really black people. And they told me where they were from. I think it was like Nigeria or somewhere like that. Somewhere like that. I don't remember. A lot of countries in Africa. And, or South Africa maybe. So anyway, and they said, yeah. And I said, oh, it's interesting country, whatever. And we talked about the country. We talked about life in that country and how things were done and different. I guess you could say the culture of the country, but I didn't think of it as culture. I thought of it as those people live there and they have a life and they have a lifestyle and they have things that they do and they don't do, and things that they do maybe differently than they do here in West Virginia. I don't know. It happens. It's just a different place. People that live in Venice probably, travel by boat a lot when they want to go downtown shopping. Eskimos maybe, travel with dog sleds. Still. But, that's they have the necessity of doing that. I don't have to do that. I don't have that much snow. So, you understand what I'm saying? Let's not get bogged down and get all fighty and nasty about this. Just treat people like people. Just be a human being. Treat other people like human beings. Stop with the racism. Stop with the, you got to remember your culture, heritage crap. I mean, if you want to study people's culture, look at it this way. I want to study the history of those people that lived in that part of the world. Okay, that's fine. That's not the same thing as saying, you're a black person and, your culture is like subservient to mine or some damn shit like that. It's just ridiculous. All right. Had to say on that subject, and I'm going to wrap it up here. Here's the thing. Share my podcasts. If you got to this point, you've listened to it about 40 minutes now. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully your life has been enriched a little bit in some way. Hopefully you've gotten something to think about critically. Critical thinking is important. Stupid thinking is not so good. So share the podcast. This one and all the rest of them. There's about 160 of them out there. And YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, my home base from a radio show, a few others, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, and so forth. Spread it around. I would like other people to hear what I have to say, to let them think and learn and perhaps grow and perhaps become a little bit, have their lives might be improved a little bit, because maybe, they're not happy. So maybe what I say can make them feel a little better about themselves and about life, and maybe they can be inspired and so forth. So share my podcast. Please share it on Facebook. Share it wherever you are. Share it with people. All right? Appreciate it. And by the way, remember this. A quote. Yeah. All right. It is the duty of the patriot to protect his country from its government. Oh, and that doesn't mean I'm a conspiracy theory nutter, because I'm not. Okay? Not one of those. Don't believe, don't have anything to do with that cult called QAnon. I don't have anything to do with the Trump cult, wacko crazy people. Yeah, that kind of upsets you if you're one of those Trumpers, but I don't care. Fuck you. You're an idiot. All right, so D. McClung, that's me. D. McClung's Arctra Monologues, that's what this is, podcast. And that's where I talk and you don't. But if it's on YouTube, you're listening to this, then you can go down in the comment section and make a comment. Ask a question if you like. I'll do my best to answer it. If you're going to go on there and make stupid comments and call me bad names and shit, libel, slander, defamation, those are civil crimes, by the way. If you want to do that, no, don't even think about it, because, it'll be like, bam, gone like that. Seriously. So don't waste your time putting it up there. I will delete it immediately and you'll be blocked. Blocked forever from my podcast and whatever else I might be associated with, right? So, hey, have a good day. Catch you later and be cool.